I have to look at the schedule because I don't know when they're going to lose that first game. I will say that they have to be wary of some of their divisional opponents. I think, they have to go to Dallas later in the year. That's going to be a very interesting matchup.
Young Brian Dable. I love it. I love Tones and Shields, man. I mean, we joked about this when Brian Dable was hired, Jordan. But, man, I'll tell you what, Jordan James, CBSSports.com, he's here with us. He knows I'm probably not in a great mood this morning because I got to see a no-hitter last night. I'm not in my team's favor. But how you doing, my man?
What's going on, man? You're not in a good mood. You got to see a no-hitter. I've never seen a no-hitter before.
I've seen two of them now. I'm not, and the Phillies haven't completed any of them, so
gotcha.
Not happy, man. But I have to ask you because Washington might have had the greatest day in their franchise in about 30 years. Dan Snyder actually trying to sell the team. I mean, what was your initial reaction when you saw that press release?
Yeah, if I look a little bit tired right now, it's actually because I just got back from the parade that we had in D.C. last night. As you mentioned, it was probably one of the best sports days in D.C. history. So if you missed out on the story for your listeners, the Dan Snyder family has hired Bank of America Securities to consider quote-unquote potential transactions of the franchise, which, of course, could include finding new ownership, which is why everyone is excited. Now, it's interesting because Dan Snyder, and I think this is worth mentioning, he has bought out all minority stakes in the team. He did this last year, giving his family 100% ownership. So that's kind of interesting to me because while I don't want to be the Debbie Downer, I do want to be a realist. It's very possible that Dan Snyder is not looking to sell the entire franchise and get out of Dodge when it comes to his role in the NFL world. It could also be very possible that he's starting to sell off different minority stakes once again to people he trusts, which could in turn give you a cash influx to build a new stadium, which has been Washington's goal for years now. In fact, Jeff, it's so important that, remember that ESPN report that came out a few weeks ago talking about all the misdeeds of Snyder and basically a history lesson on why he's a bad owner. There was one owner that was quoted in that ESPN story saying that if Washington could get that new stadium built, this whole drama, and the way I describe it, a new stadium would be the heavy Febreze spray that would cover up the gross odor emanating from Washington. A new stadium is very important for this franchise and very important for Dan Snyder. So that's why I'm not so gung-ho to jump on board and say, yes, let's celebrate. Snyder is selling the team because that's not official just yet. We do not know that just yet.
We got to think of the optics here. Who in their right mind would buy a minority stake in this football team knowing that Dan Snyder is partnered with you?
Right. That's a good question. It's one I've been wondering myself, and the only answer that I could really come up with would be someone who is very wealthy who also has a relationship with Dan Snyder. Now, I don't know who exactly I'm referring to, but I'm sure there are people out there with money who like Dan Snyder. Those are the optics for me. That's the option for me. So not 100% sure on how many people would be comfortable aligning themselves with Dan Snyder, especially at this point in time. But maybe there are people with a lot of money that could do that.
Your connections to the Commanders go really deep here. I mean, pretty much your whole entire adult life, they played at FedEx Field. I know they kind of want to build around there. They kind of want to build a new, I guess, FedEx Field, a new state-of-the-art stadium. But you personally, where do you want to see them? Would you be okay if they stayed in Landover?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. I mean, I'd be okay with it. That wouldn't be my first option, of course, and I don't think it'd be anybody's first option. Getting them back to DC would be really, really sweet. But here's another interesting caveat when it comes to this entire Snyder story. Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk believes that if Snyder sells and there's a new owner in Washington, that new owner could be given the site of RFK Stadium, which is something Snyder apparently can't get because every political official and every decision maker in D.C. does not like this man. So that's kind of an interesting caveat as well. And again, the new stadium has not been a goal of just this Washington franchise. It's probably the biggest goal of Snyder right now because that would give him more level footing when it comes to his standing with NFL owners.
See, that's key to me. And what RFK Stadium is being demolished, is it next year, Jordan?
I don't have the date on me, but I think it's planned to be demolished, yes.
Are they gonna have Magneto do it like how he did in Days of Future Past, or are they just actually getting rid of the stadium?
Yeah. So, but that site is still somewhat available, and Snyder can't get his hands on it. I believe that's at least been the report. So that'd be interesting if a new owner could come in and be given that site, because that would make a lot of Commanders fans very happy.
Think of this for a second. If Snyder does sell the entire Commanders, I mean, as much as I hate to admit Dan Snyder's going to make a lot of money out of this, he's going to be set for him and his family are going to be set for generations and generations. Like, I truly think this franchise could be sold for $6 billion.
Yeah, according to Forbes, the Commanders are the 6th highest value franchise in the NFL at $5.6 billion. I would lean more towards you in terms of what you're predicting, just because of how valuable these NFL teams are. Basically, I would lean towards going above that 5.6 billion. And it's funny because even though the Commanders have been the most problematic franchise probably over the past decade or so, that they're valued so highly. And I think it's because they have a lot of potential, right? They just rebranded. They have a new team president, a new GM that's only been here for a couple of years. They're looking for that new stadium site. So it's obviously a construction project, but it's one that's pretty enticing as well.
Do you think they kept their prestige because of what they were able to do in the 80s and the early 90s, and because it is Washington and it is an NFC East franchise?
Yeah, I think that the fan base is a really big part of that. I think Washington has one of the most special fan bases in the NFL, and it's because they've been put through so much, yet they still try to remain loyal. I lived in DC for a year or two when I was a kid. My whole family's from there. And when you go up there, it's all about who were formerly known as Redskins football, right? And I think the fan base is really what is a special facet of this group, even though they've been down for so long.
Is there FedEx Field issues? Like, I know Cowboys fans usually invade there. Eagles fans come down there in droves. I'm not sure about Giants fans, but definitely the Eagles and Cowboys are well represented in FedEx Field when they go there. Do the Commanders are they just like, you know what, we're not giving Dan Snyder a dime?
It could be the Steelers. It could be the Rams. It could be everyone, all the away fans always definitely take over FedEx Field. And I think the reason why is pretty complicated. One, the Commanders aren't that good of a football team, so it's not like people are going to their wallets to try to buy season tickets for them. But at the same time, there are people in the camp which you describe and say, no, I don't want to give Dan Snyder a dime. I don't want to support this man. I don't want to support this franchise. I'm sure there's people that are still upset about the name rebrand, and they feel like the Commanders franchise is very unfamiliar to them as well. They're kind of in a tough spot right now from every different angle.
Do you like the Commanders name?
No, not really, but it's not the worst thing in the world. I don't hate it. I just think it's such a stereotypical name. If you were playing a Madden franchise, this would be like one of the first options or choices for your expansion team, like the Warriors, the Commanders. So no, I wanted Washington to really go out there on a limb. I know they had a lot of problems with trademarks, whether it was the Red Wolves or different other names like that. So the Commanders is just bland to me. I don't hate it, but it's bland to me.
Yeah. What I didn't like is when they announced it, I'm like, okay, let's see the uniforms, right? I'm a big uniform guy. Everybody don't like their black uniforms. I'm actually a big fan of them. I think that's a different identity, but their home and road jerseys, I'm just like, no.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the jerseys, especially the red ones. I don't know why I don't like the red ones. The white ones are okay. They're kind of interesting to me. But yeah, you mentioned the black ones. They're kind of polarizing. There's a lot of different opinions from both sides. Some people really dislike them, but there's also people who aren't Washington fans who absolutely love them. I find them pretty sexy as well.
Yeah, see, I'm a big fan. So Eagles play the Texans tonight, and one of my questions I presented at the top of the show here, because tonight could be a huge night in Philadelphia sports, obviously. Phillies playing Game 5 of the World Series. Eagles looking for the first A&O star in franchise history. But if you had to pick one team to win, Jordan, you're an unbiased observer here. Who are you going with?
Between the Eagles and the Texans?
Or the Eagles and the Phillies. Like, would you trade the Eagles loss to the Texans for a Phillies win?
No, I mean, I'm not a baseball guy, but I would imagine everybody would probably trade an Eagles win for a Phillies win at this stage because they're in the World Series. The Eagles have to lose their first game at some point, right? Even if it's to the lowly Texans. And, That's not going to happen, obviously. Breaking news here, the Eagles are not going to lose tonight. But, I mean, if you're in the World Series, obviously that win is a lot more important than some Thursday night Week 9 win.
When do you think the Eagles are going to lose, in your honest opinion?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. So I just did a project that's going to be published on CBSSports.com in a couple of hours where I tried to predict the entire playoff picture in the AFC and the NFC. And to do that, I had to go through and basically, quickly predict every remaining game on the NFL schedule. And I mean, I think I ended with the Eagles only have a couple of losses because this project is kind of tough as it is. I have to look at the schedule because I don't know when they're going to lose that first game. I will say that they have to be wary of some of their divisional opponents. I think, they have to go to Dallas later in the year. That's going to be a very interesting matchup. Obviously, like the Giants and the Commanders have experience just in terms of going against Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts. No, they're not the most talented teams that Philly will face, but I'm always going to be hesitant about some of those divisional matchups. But no, I mean, that's a great question because the Eagles are the lone remaining undefeated team in the NFL. They've made it this far. This franchise has never gone to 8-0 before, and they have a great chance to do that tonight.
I think their toughest matchup is the team you're wearing right now, the Titans. I really do. I think Titans they're starting to get it together, and I love what they're doing right now. We got Derrick Henry. No one can stop this man. Let's just go balls to the wall. We're gonna run the ball, Derrick. We got the best run defense in football. Yeah, our secondary gives up a lot of big plays, but we're gonna make sure those big plays don't happen. I kind of like how the Titans just kind of reinvented themselves after the 0-2 start, or went back to what works.
The Titans are a really weird team. They're the weirdest team in the NFL, in my opinion, because they're very live to beat any team on any given Sunday, Monday, or Thursday. This was a team without a defense a couple of years ago that gave Patrick Mahomes what was his worst loss in regular season in his career. But at the same time, I don't look at the Titans as legitimate contenders. I look at them as the best team in the AFC South. And in fact, I went on the radio in Nashville yesterday and started yelling because I was upset that they didn't make any moves at the trade deadline. It feels like they're kind of complacent and they're happy with being the best team in the AFC South, but not being in that upper echelon of elite contenders. Their wide receiver core consists of Robert Woods, Nick Westbrook-Akine, me, and you. I thought they could have upgraded that at the trade deadline. Derrick Henry is obviously one of the best players in the NFL, and he can carry an entire offense. The Titans basically didn't have a quarterback against the Texans last week. It was Derrick Henry doing all of the shouldering. In fact, I don't think Malik Willis attempted a single pass in the third quarter versus Houston last week, which was absolutely insane. So the Titans are interesting because I think they have a good defense. The cornerback play is getting better, but Jeffrey Simmons is literally one of the best players in the NFL. But if you go out there and you punch Tennessee in the mouth and you score the first points of the game, maybe go up 10-0 in the first half, that puts them in a precarious spot that it's very tough for them to come back from because they don't like to throw the football because they don't have anyone to throw the football to.
You mentioned this. I thought it was kind of funny because I remember seeing this in Malik Willis didn't throw a pass in the third quarter. How bad were the Texans? Like, how bad are they? You literally just saw them 4 days ago.
They're bad, man. In fact, tonight's not going to be about the Eagles. The Eagles aren't going to make any headlines tonight, except that they go 8-0 for the first time, in franchise history. The Texans are going to be the headline from tonight. I feel like this team's on a downward spiral. It's not because Davis Mills hasn't been the quarterback that a lot of people hypothesized he would be coming into this year. He's been a little disappointing, of course. But also they now have drama with Brandon Cooks, who is arguably their best offensive weapon. He apparently doesn't want to be in Houston anymore, which I'll also say, sidebar, why did he sign an extension with the team? That's bad. That's kind of his fault here. And for the first time in his career, he's mad that he's not traded. A little bit of blame to go around with that situation, but he's upset. I don't even know if he's going to play tonight. If he does play tonight and everybody's listening, bet the under on all his props. I don't know how effective he's going to be. It's going to be Dameon Pierce versus the world, basically. I feel like this Texas team is really on a downward spiral, and they're going to have to do it tonight in front of their home fans on national TV. The Eagles are covering the 13.5-point spread, in my opinion.
You got to give me the Nashville vibe here because I'm sure Eagles fans are going to love this, but are Titans fans still obsessed with A.J. Brown?
I actually haven't heard much about him from fans over the past few weeks. They definitely were when the deal became official through the late stages of the offseason, I should say. but I'm not seeing too much about it. Now it's more of like kind of being sorrowful that he's thriving with Philly and that the Titans have 0 receivers. At one point it did feel like Titans fans were a little obsessed with AJ Brown, but now it feels like it's wearing off because this move was great for him. It was great for the Eagles and bad for the Titans. So now we just kind of have to handle that big L.
But what's the vibes on John Robinson? Like you said, they didn't do anything at the deadline. Obviously, you're upset by it, but it just seems like John Robinson just doesn't care if he has a wide receiver or not.
I agree. It doesn't seem like they care at all. And Mike Vrabel is tasked with still being one of the best head coaches in the NFL and trying to find a way to win by playing smash mouth football and by playing defense. So John Robinson, he's very hot and cold when it comes to the fans in Nashville. There's some moves that he makes that have people crying that he's the best GM in the NFL. And then there's other things that he fails to do, for example, such as finding a wide receiver. He's had several very eye-popping misses in the draft as well that lead fans to be on the other side of the fence. I like him. I don't think he's perfect, but I do like him. But again, I really think that the Titans missed an opportunity to upgrade their roster at the trade deadline. And now the Tennessee Titans are just going to win the division, win the AFC South, and maybe win a playoff game if we're lucky.
I think the Cowboys are a very good football team. I think they could be a Super Bowl contender. But I kind of want to hear your thoughts on this because it's very mixed. Like people go, "Oh, you overhyped the Cowboys," but I'm like, "But do I know?" Because in my opinion, my honest opinion, I'm actually incredibly amazed they're 6-2 given their circumstances.
Oh yeah, I'm surprised by that record as well. And to answer your question, yeah, I do see them as a legitimate contender. If we're making our list of legitimate Super Bowl contenders, I think they have to be included. And there's 2 reasons. I mean, over the past few years, they were kind of led by their offense, even though it faltered in big moments, but they didn't really have that strong backbone of a good defense. And now it feels like they really have that. And that's why I think they have to, it's required of us to put them in that contender category. It was good to see Dak Prescott get back on track for Chicago last week because he did not look fresh. He did not look good against the Detroit Lions a couple of weeks ago. So I'm expecting them to be one of the best teams in the NFL moving forward. Hopefully Tony Pollard gets the touches that he deserves over Ezekiel Elliott. I think that's one part of the gear that the next gear, I should say, that the Cowboys can reach if they give Tony Pollard more touches, not only on the ground, but also through the air. But I really do like this Dallas team, and I think that they have the wherewithal to hoist the Lombardi, but there's no way I'm betting that they actually will.
Who would you bet in the NFC? Is it Philadelphia?
I mean, you got to lean towards Philly right now, especially when you look at the other divisions and who's going to win it. The 49ers are a very interesting team with the addition of Christian McCaffrey. They're known for their late regular season runs that they can put together. But at the same time, we have to remember that this front office wanted to move on from Jimmy Garoppolo for a reason. And I feel like if they, I talked about Tennessee getting punched in the mouth. I feel like this is the formula to beat San Francisco as well. That's what Atlanta did when they defeated the 49ers a couple weeks ago. So, yeah, if I had to pick a team from the NFC right now, it's hard not to lean to the only team that hasn't lost just yet.
The Vikings trade TJ Hawkinson, and Hawk pretty much said, I expect to be traded. I didn't expect to be a Minnesota Viking, and he's excited about the move. Obviously, why not? You're with Justin Jefferson, you're with Matt Thielen. Kirk Cousins is a lot better quarterback than people give him credit for, but do you think the Vikings, and I know the Eagles beat the crap out of them in week 2, do you think the Vikings are now the Eagles' biggest threat?
They're one of them. They're one of them. I think the Cowboys are obviously a huge threat since they're in the same division. I've already talked about the 49ers, and then, yeah, you can throw the Vikings in there as well. First of all, that TJ Hawkinson trade was the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life. I mean, giving a perspective – listen, I know TJ Hawkinson hasn't set the world on fire from the tight end position just yet, but I think a lot of people believe he has that kind of potential, and now with the new offense, he might be able to reach it. Giving a prospective star tight end, not only that, but 2 fourth-round picks to your rival at the trade deadline to make them better is a silly move by the Detroit Lions. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know if they're giving up on the season. I don't know what Dan Campbell in that front office is thinking. But, yeah, I love this move by Minnesota because we know that the offense is completely run by Dalvin Cook and Justin Jefferson. We get that week in, week out. Adding another weapon to the fray, a security blanket that's very versatile, such as TJ Hawkinson, a guy who can serve as your check down guy on third down, but also stretch the field. That's pretty dangerous. And I really do like Kevin O'Connell. He's a former Washington guy. I've been following him for years. I think he's doing a tremendous job with Minnesota. Love this move to add Hawkinson. And yes, I think that they are one of Philly's most chief concerns in the conference.
Kevin O'Connell was a quarterback for them too at one point, wasn't he?
He was once Tom Brady's backup in New England. He was a third string guy. He got released, and I don't think he ever played for the Washington franchise, but yeah, he was an assistant coach, and then he got to quarterbacks coach. I'll never forget this. Working with you at 247 Sports for that 1 year in 2018, that offseason when Jay Gruden was the head coach, he went to the NFL owners meeting, and they asked him, "We just saw you promoted Kevin O'Connell from quarterbacks coach to offensive coordinator. Why did you do that?" And he said, "Well, every NFL team was trying to poach him for their quarterback jobs, for their quarterback spot, or for their offensive coordinator spot. They had to promote him. And even though when he was a young guy, he actually did get an interview and consideration once Jay Gruden was fired for head coach. So it's no one's surprise that he's a head coach right now, and it's to the surprise of no one that he's thriving as well."
Does it frustrate you as a Washington fan knowing they had Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Kevin O'Connell? I'm sure I'm missing at least two more names in there.
No, because I think a lot of people forget that, Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan, they were definitely guys who were lower on the coaching totem pole. They weren't all of them weren't offensive coordinators. The O'Connell one did rub me the wrong way just because I was so high on this guy. I was pumping out articles for 247, basically trying to get his name out there.
That.
Yeah, I was all on Kevin O'Connell, and because I knew he would be a good head coach. He was one of those stereotypical Washington assistant offensive-minded guys like Shanahan and like McVay that I thought could be the second coming of one of those guys. And sure enough, he's doing a great job with Minnesota. So, yeah, it's frustrating to have those guys once in your building in Richmond. But at the same time, a couple of those guys that we had weren't necessarily in consideration to be head coaches at the time.
The Commanders are 4-4. They won 3 in a row. I think they're back in the playoff race, quite honestly, if you look at the NFC playoff race. But how do you feel about them through 8 weeks and their prospects going forward?
I guess they're technically in the playoff race. Yeah, that's correct. They're at 500, which is great. I mean, I don't feel great about it. I didn't give them much consideration when I was doing this project that's going to be published in a couple of hours in terms of the NFC playoff race. I didn't give much consideration to them and putting them in there as a wild card. I mean, this defense still has some issues. I'm excited to see what Chase Young does once he gets back. I'm sure he's going to bring some juice. But the quarterback position looms large. Carson Wentz has not been good. Taylor Heineke has won 2 straight games, and he's a really fun player who's becoming a fan favorite around the NFL, not just in Washington. He's got that clutch gene, right? He's got that clutch gene that a lot of starting quarterbacks don't have. He's the guy who can take the field for a prospective game-winning drive, and you can be confident in him. He's done it, 2 times in a row now. So, but at the same time, we saw what this kid is as a starting quarterback last year, and there's a reason that Washington wanted to replace him. So even if Washington rolls forward through the rest of the regular season with Heineke instead of Wentz, I'm not exactly looking at this franchise as a legitimate contender. They got great weapons, but they have some injuries on the offensive line, some good running backs. Still, I think that you can make an argument that they're the worst team in the NFC East.
Is Carson Wentz going to be the starter when he comes back?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of that hinges on what happens moving forward. What happens Sunday against the Minnesota Vikings? I've been correct in predicting Washington to win outright when they were underdogs in the past 2 weeks. This week, I'm going against that. I'm actually going to roll with the Minnesota Vikings. This is a revenge game for Kirk Cousins. It's not under the lights, so you don't have to be scared that he's not going to perform well. The sun is out. So I like Kirk Cousins in this matchup against Washington. Heineke is going to continue to have to win games if we want to have that discussion about what that quarterback spot's going to look like. Because I think you have to remember that Ron Rivera kind of put himself out there saying that he was the guy who went out there and got Wentz. I don't know if that's true or not, but he's saying it. And I think that as a head coach, you kind of have to keep to your word and roll with the guy that you exuded so much confidence in the offseason back when no one was confident in Carson Wentz.
How do you feel about your doppelganger, Brian Dable, and how the Giants' long-term outlook look, at least for 2022?
They're a fascinating team because you look at this squad and you look at them on paper, you even watch them play on Sundays, and you're like, this team isn't that good. But at the same time, they don't beat themselves. I think they're the best team when it comes to one-score games, or I think they've had most comeback victories in the fourth quarter where they've trailed. they don't beat themselves. They don't turn the ball over. Saquon Barkley's back to elite status. Brian Daboll's doing the best he can with the lackluster wide receiving core he has. And I think most importantly, Wink Martindale has brought a breath of fresh air to this defense as well. They're playing solid ball. Did I pause? Am I okay?
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
My screen almost broke. Yeah, so I think the Giants are a really solid team, and I in fact in this playoff project, I believe I have them grabbing a wild card spot as well because they had such a hot start, and that's going to help them record wise when things start getting hot and heavy towards the end of the regular season.
This is how I look at the Giants, right? I still don't know if they should bring back Daniel Jones or not. To me, it's a mixed bag. Like, he's playing well, but then I keep thinking, what if Brian Daboll gets an actual quarterback in there?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of people out there guessing that they've already kind of made up their mind on Daniel Jones, but it also comes down to the offseason and the monies and seeing what other options are really tangible to go out there and get, because that's my mindset too. I don't think Daniel Jones is bad. In fact, I think there's a large facet of people who give him more hate than he deserves. But obviously, quarterback position is the most important in the NFL, and you're not going to be a legitimate Super Bowl contender unless you have the right guy in place. So I imagine we're going to see reports at the end of the year, the stereotypical, the Giants are doing their due diligence on their quarterback situation in free agency and in the draft. That's what we're going to see come through ESPN and NFL media.
Outside opinion, do you think Jalen Hurts is MVP?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. I think Josh Allen is a really good bet right now as well. And the Buffalo Bills, in my opinion, are ahead of the Philadelphia Eagles if I had to power rank them. So Josh Allen's been the odds-on favorite all year, I believe. But Jalen Hurts absolutely has a case. And he looks like a more tantalizing dual-threat weapon, even though both of them are really great dual-threat weapons. And I think you have to love what Philly has weapon-wise as well. And I feel like these guys of Zach Pascal, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Quez Watkins is like one of my favorite players in the league, by the way. All these guys together really give Jalen Hurts a great opportunity to possibly be the MVP at the end of the season. And there's a reason that this team is undefeated. And, if they end the season with only a couple of losses on their record, with a better record than the Buffalo Bills, I think that's something that could be taken into consideration as well.
You mentioned earlier, you're a prop guy at CBS here. So you mentioned earlier, take the under on Dameon Pierce. Is there any other props you'd like tonight?
No, I'd say take the under on Brandon Cooks. Don't take the under
Brandon
on
Cooks. That's right. Sorry, wrong guy.
Yeah. Don't take the under on Dameon Pierce. He's going to be the main offensive guy for the Texans tonight. But, a couple of props. I like Devontae Smith to go over 51 yards tonight. He hasn't gone over 51 yards, I think, in 3 straight games, but he's caught at least 5 passes in 3 straight games. I'm calling my shot this time. A.J. Brown just had a monster game. Let's get Devontae Smith over 51 yards. I also really like Jalen Hurts to throw over 1.5 touchdowns. I get that the game script is kind of funky. He might get benched in the fourth quarter again if the Eagles are up big. But for him to throw 2 touchdowns at minus 120, I believe it is, I think that's great value. We all knew he had 3 in the first half against the Steelers last week. So go ahead and take the over on Jalen Hurts passing touchdowns.
What NFL picks do you like this week?
Yeah, so I have to write my column tonight. So I haven't really sat down to pick the games just yet. But I brought up the Minnesota Vikings. I've already given that pick out on the radio, so I'm going to have to stick with it. The Minnesota Vikings to cover 3.5 against the Washington Commanders. This Vikings team right now is kind of rolling, and their defense is getting better too, which is the biggest perceived weakness they had through the early stages of the regular season. I like Minnesota in this spot. The other line I'm looking at right now, and I have to have 5. I only have 1. But the other line I'm looking at right now has to do with the New England game. I think that the Patriots – who are they hosting? Do you remember?
This week? Is it? It's not Jets week. That was last week. Oh, God.
That was last week.
I just looked at the schedule, too. Hold on a second. Let me get this up. Patriots are playing.
Look at us, a couple of professionals. They're hosting the Colts.
Thank you. Yeah. You know why we're thinking about that? Because we don't care about the Colts and the Patriots. They're terrible.
I don't remember because it's 6:54 a.m. in Nashville, and I'm still tired. Sam Ellinger and the Colts are going to Foxborough. We know what Bill Belichick does to these rookie quarterbacks. He's not a rookie, but he's only started 1 game in his NFL career. I think they're minus 4 points or so. So the Patriots at home is definitely a pick I like.
Tona's asking me this out of curiosity. Could the Packers lose to the Lions?
Yeah, that's absolutely something that could happen. I think that Detroit, while I was going in on them a couple of minutes ago with their deal with TJ Hawkinson, they still statistically have one of the best offenses in the NFL. DeAndre Swift's health is going to be a big issue with that. But they can put up points and they can put up yards. They can't stop anybody, but they can put up points. And when it comes to this Packers team, I think that you can win by outscoring them. I know that sounds very primitive, but they can win if they outscore them because the Packers aren't putting up many points these days. So they're very live, but I don't think that's going to be one of my top 5 picks this week.
Speaking of the Packers, every time I hear Aaron Rodgers talk now, I'm just like, dude, shut up. You are just as responsible as everybody else on this team why they drop so much.
That's definitely the narrative around him right now. And, a lot of people have a lot of problems with how Aaron Rodgers is communicating to the media about his teammates specifically. I will say this. I agree with you and I agree with everybody else. But at the same time, Aaron Rodgers is kind of Aaron Rodgers, back-to-back MVP, a quarterback that's not getting any younger, that only has a couple of years left to chase that next Lombardi trophy. I understand why he's saying what he's saying because it's do or die time right now. And I'm trying to get everybody on my level. I'm trying to get everybody on board so I can orchestrate yet another regular season turnaround such as he's done before.
Yeah, that's another team where at the deadline I was kind of shocked. They didn't get a receiver. They didn't do anything. Maybe all their eggs are in Odell Beckham's basket.
They missed out on Chase Claypool, and I feel bad because they gave an offer of a second-round pick, but the Steelers looked at their second-round pick versus, the Bears' second-round pick.
Yeah.
Which one are you going to choose? Everyone's going to choose the Bears' second-round pick 100 times out of 100 times because that's going to be the better pick in that scenario. So that's just a really bad beat for the Packers. But they could have gone out there and chased somebody else. I don't care if they're signing Will Fuller off the street. They need to do something for this wide receiving core.
Before I let you go, what did you think the Texans won for Brandon Cooks? Because there were rumors that they kind of wanted the first for him.
I think that's crazy. If that is true and they told people they wanted a first, I think it's because they didn't want to trade Brandon Cooks. And I think that's very possible as well. I think that Houston knows what Brandon Cooks is capable of. They already bought into being the team that could give him the consistency, the familiarity that he hasn't had with any other NFL franchises because he's been on the move so much. That's really what my question was. I don't know how much they were actually shopping him. I feel like it may have been other teams trying to acquire him as opposed to the Texans going out there and putting him on the block.
One thing we definitely know, the Texans overvalue their players. Jordan Dajani, I appreciate you coming on, man. Always a great time talking to you. Are you working the Thursday night game with me tonight?
No, I'm actually starting work in 3 minutes. I'm the morning guy, so.
Oh, even better. I'm sure Brett's going to be thrilled. You can tell I'm in such a joyous mood. So around 6 o'clock tonight, maybe it'll be over.
Absolutely, man. Really appreciate you having me on the show again. It was fun.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks for coming on, Jordan. Appreciate you, man.